My name is Alina Thorne. I'm 42 years old, and I spent my entire life building GreenGen, my own biotech company. But in a single meeting, Brandon Sterling, the investor's 30-year-old son, threw out my most important project, which is named Ethaseed, to replace it with an unproven AI system. He called my science outdated, demoted me to a meaningless advisory role, and offered a severance package for me. He thought he could get rid of me. But he made one critical mistake. He never bothered to read the founder's agreement. That agreement states that I don't just own 10% of the equity, I own all of the company's intellectual property. He thought he was restructuring the company. In reality, he just handed me, the woman he just fired, total control over its future. His latest triumph, the Ethaseed project, was almost ready. A genetically modified corn seed that could adjust its own nutrient intake and resist blight without human intervention. It was a marvel of bioengineering and machine learning. He envisioned fields feeding millions, not just for profit, but for progress. But as often happens, genius rarely comes with a good PR team. Elias had always preferred the silent language of scientific data to the loud pronouncements of corporate rhetoric. This preference, he was learning, was a vulnerability. The email landed with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Mandatory board meeting, Friday, 9 a.m. strategic reorientation. It wasn't the content, but the sender that set his teeth on edge, Brandon Sterling. Brandon was the 30-year-old stepson of Marcus Sterling, the venture capitalist who'd poured millions into GreenGen. Marcus was a shrewd investor, a man who truly understood Elias' long-term goals, or so Elias had believed. Brandon, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of buzzwords, social media metrics, and an unsettling habit of referring to Elias' life's work as legacy tech. He joined the board 6 months ago, ostensibly to modernize the brand, but quickly positioned himself as the de facto CEO, all with Marcus's tacit approval. Elias arrived at the sleek, glass-walled boardroom, a space he'd always found alien compared to his bustling lab. The room was already crowded. Brandon, impeccably dressed in a custom suit, stood at the head of the table, radiating an almost artificial confidence. He held a tablet, his polished nails tapping impatiently. Beside Marcus Sterling, a distinguished woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, Dr. Alina Vance, sat poised. She was GreenGen's chief legal officer, a veteran attorney who had drafted many of Elias' early IP agreements. Across from Elias, Ms. Evelyn Hayes, the head of investor relations, chatted animatedly with Mr. David Chen, the newly appointed head of marketing, a slick young man barely out of business school, handpicked by Brandon. "Elias, glad you could make it," Brandon chirped, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "We have some exciting developments to share." He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on David Chen. "David, your team's input was invaluable here." David Chen beamed. "Absolutely, Brandon. We're really focusing on brand narrative, moving past the mad scientist in a lab trope, no offense, Dr. Thorne." David offered a patronizing grin in Elias' direction. Elias merely nodded, his face a mask. "None taken, Mr. Chen. Just hoping the narrative includes scientific integrity." Brandon cleared his throat. "Of course, Dr. Thorne, but our primary focus now is GreenGen 2, the future of sustainable yield." He launched into a presentation featuring glossy slides, stock photos of smiling, diverse farmers, and phrases like disruptive ecosystems, blockchain-enabled traceability, and vertical farming hyperoptimization. Elias listened, his stomach coiling, as Brandon casually dismissed decades of painstaking research. "Our current seed development, while foundational," Brandon began, a dismissive wave of his hand, "is frankly too slow, too reliant on traditional genetic modification. We need speed, we need scale. That's why we're announcing Project Nova." Project Nova, as Brandon explained, was a new AI-first approach to crop optimization. It promised to rapidly develop bespoke seed varieties through predictive analytics and a fully automated cloud-based hydroponic network. The centerpiece was a new AI model, Gaia, which Brandon had personally spearheaded. "Gaia can cut our seed development cycles by 70%, Brandon declared, puffing out his chest. "It's a paradigm shift. And to facilitate this, Dr. Thorne, your team will be transitioning to a purely advisory role, focusing on historical data analysis for Gaia's learning algorithms. We see your vast experience as a critical asset, guiding our new generation of innovators." Elias felt a cold knot. Advisory role. That was corporate speak for sidelined. He looked at Marcus, his primary investor, who sat stone-faced, avoiding Elias' gaze. Evelyn Hayes nodded approvingly at Brandon's words, while David Chen gave a knowing smirk. Only Eleanor Vance seemed to be watching Elias, her expression unreadable. "Brandon," Elias interjected, his voice calm, "Gaia is a fascinating concept, but it's untested. My ether seed has undergone 5 years of rigorous field trials. Its resilience, its nutrient efficiency, its disease resistance, it's all proven. We've mitigated for local climate variations, pest resistance in real-world scenarios, not just simulations. Proven perhaps for yesterday's problems, Elias," Brandon shot back, a condescending edge in his voice. "We're building for tomorrow. The market demands agility. Investors demand returns. Frankly, your approach, while noble, lacks commercial viability. It's too slow to adapt to rapidly changing consumer demands and climate data trends." "Scientific validation isn't a trend, Brandon," Elias countered. "It's a process. Rushing it carries immense risks. We're dealing with the food supply, not a new social media app." "The risks are calculated," David Chen chimed in, leaning forward. "Our market research shows consumers crave speed, innovation. They want to know their food is from the future, not some dusty lab." Elias swallowed his retort. He knew what lacks commercial viability meant: too slow for quick profits. He looked around the room. The other board members, most of whom Brandon had brought in, nodded in agreement. Marcus remained silent, his gaze fixed on the table. "I assume," Elias said, a quiet steel in his tone, "that this reorientation also affects my intellectual property rights and my equity stake in GreenGen?" Brandon's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He glanced at Eleanor Vance, who remained impassive. "Of course, a generous severance package is being prepared, Elias. We want to thank you for your foundational contributions. We'll make sure it's more than fair." "I don't need a severance package," Elias stated. "I need clarity on my original agreement. Specifically, my 10% equity, which includes significant voting rights on product and technology development, and the IP ownership of all Thorne-developed technologies, including the ether seed and the underlying AI for our hydroponic systems." Brandon's face hardened. He looked directly at Eleanor. "Eleanor, perhaps you can clarify this for Dr. Thorne." Eleanor Vance met Elias' gaze before turning to Brandon. "The original founders' agreement, signed by Dr. Thorne and Mr. Sterling, explicitly grants Dr. Thorne 10% equity, with specific rights related to core technology development. Furthermore, all intellectual property developed by Dr. Thorne prior to a specific funding round, and subsequently enhanced by him, remains under his ownership, with GreenGen holding a usage license. Any attempt to fundamentally alter product direction or divest from Thorne-developed IP requires Dr. Thorne's direct consent, as per the 2005 addendum." A ripple of unease went through the room. Brandon's smug expression vanished. David Chen looked bewildered. "That agreement, Elias, is years old," Brandon said, his voice now strained. "We assumed it was purely symbolic at the time of initial investment. We're confident our legal team can negotiate a fair buyout." "You assumed incorrectly," Elias replied. "I never sold those rights. They are legally binding. And without my direct approval, any major restructuring, especially one that sidelines my core technologies, is a breach of contract." He rose from his seat, the rumpled lab coat suddenly looking less like a scientist's uniform and more like a warrior's cloak. "I'll consider your Project Nova a hostile takeover of my life's work. Be very careful how you proceed." He looked pointedly at Marcus. "Marcus, I expect you to uphold the integrity of our original partnership." He walked out, leaving a stunned silence. Eleanor Vance gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Elias as he left. Back in his lab, the familiar hum now felt like a taunt. Elias pulled out a dusty folder from his desk drawer. Inside lay the original founding documents of GreenGen, signed when it was little more than a dream and a grant from a university. His 10% equity, his IP rights, all explicitly detailed. It was airtight. He also had a second, smaller folder, a thick stack of notebooks, meticulously dated and signed, detailing every single genetic sequence, every line of code for his hydroponic AI, every field trial result. The ether seed was not just a product, it was an extension of his mind, carefully documented. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at GreenGen became icy. Elias' lab was slowly stripped of its resources. His team members, loyal but fearful, were gradually reassigned to support roles for Project Nova. One of his brightest young protégés, Dr. Sarah Kim, a brilliant molecular biologist, was among them. "Dr. Thorne," Sarah confided, looking distraught, They've pulled all the funding for my gene editing optimization project. Brandon says it. Redundant now that Gaia is taking over all development. And what do you think, Sarah? Elias asked gently. I think Gaia is a black box, sir, she admitted. It gives answers, but not understanding. My project was about how to make genes work better, not just what yield they might give in a simulation. Keep your research notes safe, Sarah, Elias advised. All of them. And document everything they ask you to do for Project Nova. Brandon, meanwhile, held lavish press conferences, showcasing impressive CGI renderings of future vertical farms and touting the revolutionary power of Gaia AI. Dr. Thorne's original vision was a stepping stone, Brandon declared in a tech journal interview, but we're ready to leap into the future. Gaia is the ultimate agricultural intelligence. It's about leveraging cutting-edge algorithms, not decades-old methodologies. David Chen echoed his sentiments on every social media platform. Elias watched the news, a grim satisfaction building. He knew Gaia's limitations. It was an AI built on public datasets, lacking the nuanced, real-world experience baked into his own systems. Brandon saw data points. Elias saw a living ecosystem with all its unpredictable variables. One afternoon, a junior engineer, Maya Rodriguez, a sharp young coder Elias had mentored, slipped into Elias' dwindling lab. She was bright, ambitious, and clearly troubled. Dr. Thorne, she whispered, I think you should see this. I'm on the Gaia testing team. They're pushing us to ignore certain red flags. She pulled out her phone, showing him a spreadsheet. We're running simulations for the first commercial-scale pilot in Arizona. Gaia is struggling. Badly. The spreadsheet detailed alarming projections, nutrient deficiencies in arid climates, unexpected pest susceptibility in even slightly humid conditions, and a critical bug in the AI's self-correction module that led to a cascade failure in yield optimization. It keeps overcompensating, Maya explained, her voice barely audible. It's trying to force optimal growth rates based on textbook models, but it's not adapting to real-time environmental stress. We're looking at a 60% crop failure rate in the simulations for the initial planting, and the company is pushing ahead with the physical pilot next month. Evelyn Hayes is already spinning a revolutionary resilience narrative to investors about Gaia's adaptive learning, even though we know it's failing. Why isn't anyone stopping this? Elias asked, his voice low. Brandon says it's a minor glitch, part of the iterative process, Maya replied, and that we need to hit our deployment targets for the Series B funding. He's threatening to fire anyone who raises too many concerns. Elias' jaw tightened. Thank you, Maya. You've done a very brave thing. Keep documenting everything. And don't worry about being fired. If things go south, I'll protect you. He knew what he had to do. His 10% equity gave him a voice, but his IP ownership gave him a weapon. More importantly, the impending disaster threatened not just GreenGen, but potentially a significant food supply, given the scale Brandon envisioned. Elias called Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, he said, I think it's time to draft some provisional patents, and a cease and desist. Brandon is about to deploy a system that's proven to fail in simulations at commercial scale. It's reckless. I warned them about the IP, Eleanor sighed. They were relying on a symbolic interpretation. But this is beyond contractual. This is about public safety. Days later, Brandon announced the official launch of the Arizona pilot farm, a sprawling complex of gleaming vertical towers, all powered by Gaia AI, stretching across hundreds of acres of sun-baked land. He flew in investors, government officials, and a throng of media. He even invited Elias, a condescending gesture, as if to show him what the future looked like. Elias politely declined. Instead, Elias took a different kind of flight. He traveled to Geneva to meet with Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation, but a kindred spirit, the head of the Global Food Security Initiative, GFSI, a nonprofit organization dedicated to sustainable agriculture worldwide. Elias had consulted with GFSI for years, sharing his research on robust, adaptable crops for developing nations. Eris, Elias began, laying out Maya's simulations, Sarah's stalled research, and his own more extensive data. Brandon, Gaia system is a disaster waiting to happen. It's too brittle, too focused on raw yield without accounting for environmental resilience, and he's pushing it into arid zones, precisely where our ethoseed thrives. Eris's face paled as he reviewed the data. This could be catastrophic. If a pilot fails on that scale, it could set back public trust in agri-tech for years. The damage to the environment from overfertilization, the waste of resources, it's irresponsible. Precisely, Elias said. I also have documentation proving ownership of the core genetic engineering and AI algorithms that actually work. Brandon is essentially claiming credit for my life's work and then building an untested, unstable system on top of it. He's leveraging Evelyn Hayes's investor network with false promises, and David Chen is painting a picture that's completely divorced from reality. Eris leaned back. So, you want to expose him? I want to protect my technology, prevent a farming disaster, and ensure that green gen, or at least its true innovations, survive, Elias replied. I also believe the ether seed, properly utilized, could be a game changer for GFSI's mission, especially in regions facing acute water scarcity. We can help, Eris confirmed. We have connections in the scientific community, with environmental agencies, and with ethical investment groups. We also have a duty to public safety and to promoting responsible innovation. Days later, the Arizona pilot farm was a media spectacle. Brandon, beaming, stood before rows of young corn shoots, proclaiming a new era. David Chen live-streamed the grand opening, filling social media feeds with glowing reviews. What they didn't know was that beneath the surface, Gaia was already struggling. The desert heat, combined with an unexpected dry wind, was pushing the system beyond its programmed limits. The first signs of trouble appeared subtly. Patches of leaves started yellowing. Then came the wilting. The AI, designed to self-correct, began to overcompensate wildly, dousing plants with excess nutrients that burned their roots, or withholding water because its sensors registered oversaturation due to a faulty algorithm in the humidity readings. Within 2 weeks, the lush green rows Brandon had boasted about were turning a sickly brown. The media, initially enthusiastic, began to question. Local farmers, who had been skeptical from the start, offered grim, "I told you so" looks. Social media feeds, once filled with David Chen's glowing posts, started seeing an influx of critical comments and photos of dying crops. Brandon, panicked, ordered the data to be optimized for public consumption. Evelyn Hayes frantically tried to reassure investors, but even her polished demeanor began to crack under the pressure of the unfolding disaster. David Chen shifted his focus to damage control, deleting negative comments and posting vague statements about unforeseen environmental challenges. "This is not a challenge, this is a catastrophe," Elias heard Dr. Sarah Kim exclaim one day in the Green Gen hallway. She had just returned from an inspection tour of the Arizona site. The soil is oversaturated with nitrates, the water system is failing, and the plants are dying from blight because Gaia's pest detection algorithms are garbage. At this critical juncture, Eleanor Vance sent GreenGen a formal cease and desist letter. It detailed Elias' IP ownership of the ethaseed technology and his original hydroponic AI. It also highlighted the gross negligence of using an untested system at commercial scale, citing internal data provided by Maya and Sarah, anonymously, of course. The letter threatened legal action if Elias' technology was further appropriated or if Project Nova continued its destructive path. The board of GreenGen, already reeling from the pilot's failure and the negative press, was thrown into chaos. Marcus Sterling, finally breaking his silence, confronted Brandon. "You assured me Gaia was ready, Brandon," Marcus thundered in a closed-door meeting, his face flushed. "You promised innovation, not environmental catastrophe. Evelyn is reporting investors are pulling out. David can't spin this disaster." "It's just teething problems, Dad," Brandon stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "We can fix it, we just need more data, more time." "We're losing millions, Brandon, millions, and Elias, he owns the very technology that could save us and he's threatening to sue. Eleanor has confirmed his IP claims are solid. This isn't just about money now, it's about our reputation, our legacy." "But I developed Gaia, it's my vision," Brandon protested, desperation creeping into his voice. "Your vision, Brandon," Marcus shot back, "is now a symbol of hubris. The company is bleeding. We need to act." Simultaneously, the Global Food Security Initiative released a scathing report. Without naming GreenGen directly, it warned against the dangers of rapidly deploying untested AI in agriculture, highlighting the specific vulnerabilities that Gaia had demonstrated. The report cited an alarming case study of a major commercial pilot and referenced proprietary field-tested solutions as the only viable path forward for sustainable yields in challenging climates. This was Elia's subtly powerful leverage, resonating with environmental groups and responsible investors. The pressure mounted. Investors began pulling out. Media outlets ran stories questioning Brandon's leadership and GreenGen's future, often juxtaposing David Chen's earlier boasts with the grim reality. The stock plummeted, wiping out a significant chunk of Marcus Sterling's investment. Finally, an emergency board meeting was called. Elias was invited, not as an employee, but as a major shareholder and IP owner. Dr. Sarah Kim and Maya Rodriguez were also present, invited by Alina Vance to provide expert testimony. Brandon, haggard and pale, sat at the table, his earlier arrogance replaced by palpable fear. Evelyn Hayes looked defeated, her investor charm useless against hard data. David Chen sat silently, no longer live streaming. Marcus Sterling began, his voice heavy with disappointment and anger. "We are facing a crisis of confidence, financial ruin, and a potential lawsuit that could bankrupt this company. Brandon, your Project Nova has failed, and in doing so, it has damaged GreenGen's reputation beyond measure." Brandon tried to argue, to shift blame, to plead for more time, but his words rang hollow. "With all due respect, Mr. Sterling," Alina Vance interjected, "the evidence is irrefutable. Dr. Kim, Ms. Rodriguez, would you like to present your findings?" Sarah Kim, though nervous, spoke with scientific clarity, detailing the systemic flaws in Gaia and the environmental damage. Maya Rodriguez presented the damning internal simulations that had been ignored. Their testimony was devastating. Then Marcus turned to Elias. "Elias, what do you propose? The company is on the brink." Elias stood. He didn't gloat. He didn't grandstand. His gaze swept across the faces, from a crestfallen Brandon to a weary Marcus to a somber Alina, a concerned Sarah and Maya. "I propose we go back to basics," Elias began, his voice firm yet measured. "Back to proven science. Back to the ethaseed and the GreenGen hydroponic system that actually works. We halt Project Nova immediately. We salvage what we can from the Arizona pilot and implement my tested protocols, with Dr. Kim overseeing genetic integrity and Ms. Rodriguez optimizing the AI framework based on real-world feedback, not purely theoretical models." "And your IP?" asked another board member. "Your equity, your lawsuit?" "My IP remains mine," Elias stated. "My equity also remains mine. As for the lawsuit, I am willing to put it on hold, provided I am given full operational control over research and development and a significant role in guiding the company's future strategy. Brandon Sterling must be removed from any executive or directorial position, effective immediately. David Chen and Evelyn Hayes must also be reevaluated for their roles, as their strategies have proven to be dangerously misaligned with scientific reality and investor trust." Brandon gasped, shaking his head. "You can't do this." "I believe I can, Brandon," Elias said, his eyes meeting Marcus. "And I believe, Marcus, that you owe it to the original vision of GreenGen and to the future of sustainable agriculture to make the right choice." Marcus Sterling closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, filled with a resigned resolve. "Agreed." The vote was taken. Brandon was out. David Chen and Evelyn Hayes were put on indefinite administrative leave pending review. Elias was in. In the aftermath, Elias didn't take Brandon's old office. He returned to his lab, now bustling with renewed energy. Maya was promoted to lead engineer, her insights invaluable. Sarah Kim became the head of seed development, empowered to pursue her innovative gene editing projects. The Arizona pilot, under Elias' guidance and with the ethaseed, was slowly salvaged, demonstrating remarkable resilience and proving the scientific integrity behind Elias' work. Alina Vance remained as chief legal officer, ensuring all new projects adhered strictly to IP and ethical guidelines. Marcus Sterling, humbled, stepped back into a more advisory role, trusting Elias to lead the scientific vision. Elias also honored his silent partnership with Eris Thorne and the GFSI. He licensed the ethaseed technology to them, free of charge, for use in struggling agricultural regions worldwide. It was a quieter victory, but one that resonated deeply with his original vision of feeding the world. Months later, GreenGen Innovations, under a new, more experienced CEO chosen by Marcus and Elias, began to rebuild its reputation. The ethaseed became its flagship product, proving its worth in diverse climates. The hydroponic AI, refined and expanded by Elias, truly revolutionized sustainable farming, but always with a human hand guiding its ethical deployment. One evening, Elias sat on a bench outside his revitalized lab, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The hum of his systems, now gentle and productive, was a soothing balm. He picked up a handful of rich, dark earth, crumbling it between his fingers. Dr. Sarah Kim joined him, holding a small pot with a vibrant young ethaseed sprout. "It's incredible, Dr. Thorne," Sarah said, her eyes shining. "This sprout nurtured by real science, not just algorithms, it feels alive." "It is, Sarah," Elias replied. "It's a testament to patience, diligence, and respecting the complex beauty of nature. We didn't seek power or fame. We simply sought to protect life's work, to ensure that true innovation, born from rigorous science and ethical application, would thrive." Maya Rodriguez approached, a confident smile on her face. "The latest yield reports from Arizona are phenomenal, Dr. Thorne. Even the local farmers are amazed. They say the corn tastes better." Elias chuckled. "Because it was grown with integrity, Maya, not just profit margins." He looked at the vast fields beyond, now green and flourishing. In a world obsessed with disruption and speed, it's easy to forget the value of what is truly built to last. It's easy to chase the next big trend, the loudest voice, the flashiest presentation. He looked at Sarah and Maya, the bright future of GreenGen. But true progress isn't about rushing to the finish line. It's about laying a solid foundation, brick by painstaking brick. It's about listening to the quiet wisdom of experience, even when it's drowned out by the noise of ambition. It's about understanding that technology is a tool, not a shortcut, and that real impact comes from a deep respect for both science and humanity. The soil smelled fertile, promising. And Elias, the quiet engine, knew his seeds would continue to grow, guided by steady hands and unwavering principles. Their story was a reminder. In the race for tomorrow, never underestimate the power of the roots you've put down today. The future doesn't belong to the loudest voice, but to the most authentic.